right, welcome back to another video of Big Ten tiers. For today, we are going to be tiering the top defensive linemen in the conference heading into 2025. So, I guess right off the bat, I was thinking if I should specify this to just defensive ends, pass rushers, interior defensive linemen. I think today's day and age more than ever, defensive linemen are a very uh, multifaceted position. You can get edge defenders and defensive tackles, and in my opinion, I think that's way easier to separate the two. You get people consider outside linebackers defensive ends, which really just pertains to a system that your defense is running rather than your actual skill set. So, for the sake of this video, I decided to combine edge defenders and defensive tackles, and kind of just go from there. So, uh, we have, I believe, one, two, three, four, six different tiers here, and I decided to do the top 30. I could have gone crazy, go to the top 50, but that would have been a little obnoxious. So, we are going to be ranking the top 30 defensive linemen in the conference, and right at the top, I think you got to start with Penn State. Um, a lot of people were surprised to see Danny Dennis Sutton return to Penn State for this season, and I think he deserves to be viewed as the top defensive lineman in the conference. Potential first round pick. He has a year of production now under his belt, and I think it's fair for there to be some high expectations for him. I don't know if he's the most talented D lineman in the conference, but the mixture of first round talent, returning production, I just don't think you can really argue anyone else here. And then number two, I have his teammate, Zane Durant, who I think could be another first round pick, um, who could be in line for a huge season at Penn State this year. And I think it's a big reason why people are such high on the Nittany Lions this year. They have arguably an elite offensive line, elite defensive line, great running backs. They improved the receiving room. They went out and got the defensive coordinator from the national title Ohio State Buckeyes. Doing some more research this offseason now, I'm talking myself into Penn State. I think should be the favorite in this conference, to be completely honest. And I think the only reason they're not is because they haven't done it. And people are going to question James Franklin until he's done it. But on paper, I think the mixture of returning production, coordinators, stability at uh, coaching staff, I think Penn State's best team in this conference. And I know my first team tiers video I did, I had them third, but I'm talking myself into number one, and the defensive line's a big reason why. So I won't be too long winded here as we get down the list, but Mikal Kamara is number three on this list. Began his career at James Madison, followed Cignetti to Indiana, and he has first round potential. In this top tier, I considered it elite players that are at the top of a team's scouting report. They can completely change the game, completely impact a game from the defensive line, which is not always the most common thing, but that's these players on this tier. And then lastly, I have Mateo Uyunglele, and that last name is familiar because he is the younger brother of DJ and a great defensive lineman at Oregon. Um, I'm talking into maybe Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State. Uh, those three teams are the top tier in the conference easily, but I'll get into it a little bit. A big reason why Ohio State has a lot of questions is their defensive line's not like what it used to be, what it has been, excuse me. Um, you had Nick Bosa, you had Joey Bosa, you had Chase Young, you had even Jack Sawyer last year. These dominant defensive linemen, and I don't think they really have one this year who's a surefire first round pick. And I think that's a big reason why Ohio State's been so great is that you look at the receivers, you look at the skill position guys, but their defensive line has been a freaking machine the last decade. And they're churning out elite all American talent. And they might not even have a top 10 lineman in this conference, which is really interesting heading into the year. So the second tier now I considered potentially elite. Guys who, if you ask these fan bases, they're going to say, yes, they're elite, but still have one step to take. At the top, Aaron Graves, defensive tackle from Iowa. He has production. He returns. Really a really good college football player. He just has one more step if he wants to become a first round pick. And then Gabe Jackus. I don't know how you say his last name. I'm going to assume that's how it is, but Illinois defensive end, a really talented player, might be the best player on Illinois. Um, and could develop into a first round pick by year's end. And he's a big reason why people are high on the Illini heading into the year. And then for Gophers fans listening to this list, Anthony Smith, I have in the second tier as the seventh best defensive lineman in the conference. I think he could wind up being a first round pick. I truly think he's that good. He has all the tools. I remember the first time I saw him at Gophers practice. He was he's a massive human being. He's just a giant person. He's shredded physically, and he backed it up with production last year. I think he had a sack in 5 of the last 7 games, something along those lines. And I think he can be a double-digit guy this year. And if he does that, he's going to be in the mix to be potential all-conference, and he's going to be in the top 50 discussion, I think, of next year's NFL draft. In my opinion, this year, I think he's the best football player on the Gophers. A lot of people are going to say Darius Taylor. A lot of people are going to say Coy Parrish. I love Coy Parrish as much as the next guy, and it might be a 1A, 1B, but Anthony Smith is everything you want from a defensive lineman. There are not many people of his caliber that come through the Gophers program often, and I think he's going to go down as in that tier of guys like Boye Mafe and Antoine Winfield Jr., who became first or second round picks, Tyler Nubin. And I think he's in line for that type of year this year. And people are going to be like, wow, this Anthony Smith guy is special. I think he's that good. So I honestly wanted to put him a little higher, and I think you could argue for as high as 5, but that might be pushing it. So that wraps up this tier. And then the next one, I have high ceiling, lower floor. Guys who could get into that potentially elite tier, but I don't think they're good enough to be in the elite tier. But they also kind of could bottom out, and you kind of be like, "Ooh, I forgot about that guy." Top of this list, Derek Moore, a guy who has some first round potential, and if he ends up as a first round pick in 2026, would not be shocked at all. If he kind of fizzled out and came back to Michigan for another year, I also would not be shocked at all. Kind of a guy like Danny Dennis Sutton heading into last year. So Michigan has a lot of guys like that they have a lot of options, and they might be the deepest defensive line in the conference, but I don't know if they have that true star like a Penn State or Oregon have, in my opinion. Next on this list, Bear Alexander from Oregon. I probably should have put him lower on this list, to be completely honest. Began his career at Georgia, transferred to USC, and then his dad, I think, told him to sit out last year because he wasn't playing enough or something. That's never a good sign, to be completely honest. But on paper, first round talent. And Dan Lanning's a really good coach, so that I really like. So that's a main reason why I put him a little higher. I think Dan Lanning gets the best out about Bear Alexander, and we see a big bounce back year. And he might be in day 1 or day 2 discussions next year NFL draft. Rayshon Benny, another guy who is much like his teammate Derek Moore, could wind up being one of the better defensive tackles in this conference, but also wouldn't shock me if he was a little underwhelming and came back for another year. Then we have Tatum Tuoti from Oregon. Definitely butchered that last name. Don't hold me to that. But another guy who showed some promise last year. He's a lot closer to an outside linebacker than a true defensive end. But Oregon, like I mentioned, three guys in the top 11 there. I really like what they did on the defensive line. But next, we have the first Ohio State guy on this list. Edric Houston, a former five-star recruit. Didn't play a whole lot last year, but Ohio State's known for these guys to take another step in their sophomore year, and I think that's what we're going to see. I'm just banking on the developmental system that Ohio State has. I'm banking on um, their track record. They're Ohio State, and they're going to have one of these defensive linemen who gets 10, 12 sacks, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, there it is. And I think Houston on paper is probably the most talented guy. So last guy in this tier, Max Llewellyn from Iowa. I'm also talking myself into Iowa being a really good team next year. They just have so many dudes. Their offensive line's great. Their defensive line's great. If they get, I like Mark Gronowski too. And listen, I don't like Iowa as much as anyone listening to this, but they got a solid team this year. And if they improve that offense, look out. Next on this list, I this tier is the elite transfers tier, high profile transfers. But Bear Alexander could have easily been in this tier and probably should have. But at 14, we got Bo Atkinson, transfer from North Carolina. Another guy who, if he's the best defensive lineman on this Ohio State team, wouldn't surprise me. But then again, that's why I'm kind of lower on Ohio State the more I think about it, because they're Ohio State. They don't have a North Carolina transfer be their best defensive lineman. They have guys like Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young. And I don't think they have that guy on this team. So that's interesting. But then we got Keyshawn Silver from USC, transferred from Kentucky. USC, they lost a big defensive line at the portal. I blanking on who it is at the top of my head, but looking to refill that with Keyshawn Silver. And I think that's probably going to be their biggest weakness, if they have any, is their defensive line this year. I say if they have any, they have a lot, but Keyshawn Silver, I think clearly their best defensive lineman. And we got Trey Williams at Michigan, who transferred in from Clemson. Plenty of experience. I think a high floor type of guy, much like James Thompson Jr. at Illinois, who transfers in from Wisconsin. And then the last guy on this tier, a super high ceiling, probably a relatively low floor guy, Williams Nwaneri from Missouri to Nebraska. A five-star guy, that super talented dude. Might have been a little overrated on truly being a five-star, but big pickup for Nebraska and could have a sneaky good year as a true sophomore. Next, Kiana Davis, who probably is the best defensive lineman on Nebraska, but this tier is great complementary guys that if they're your best defensive lineman, I don't think you're going to have a great D line. But they're good players, and you want them to play on the field, and they'll probably have good years, but not that high of a ceiling. So next we got TJ Guy from Michigan, then Ethan Herkett from Iowa, Jordan Walker from Rutgers, one guy on this list that I kind of wanted to put a little higher. I think he's sneaky. Rutgers is sneaky. They're always hiding in plain sight, but a solid player nonetheless. And then another Ohio State guy here, Kenyatta Jackson Jr. And then lastly, Tyreek Tucker from Indiana. So to round out this tier list, we got the last tier, which are underrated guys. Cade McDonald, a defensive tackle from Ohio State. And then I want to talk about a couple Minnesota guys. We got Devin Easter, who I think is a really good starting defensive tackle in the Big Ten, but I don't know how much pro potential he has, which I think limits him to be any higher on this list. A program like Minnesota, those are guys you want. you're not going to have a team full of 4 and 5 stars. And Devin Eastern was a high 3 star. The Gophers have developed him, and he's turned into a great college football player. Is he going to have like 2 sack games in games where um, teams build their entire game plan around? I don't think so. But then again, he's not going to make many mistakes, and he's a defensive tackle you want on your team. So that's what places him in this tier for me. And then we have Cameron Brandt from Michigan, a edge defender. Caden Curry, edge defender from Ohio State. Um, and then Linus Davis, if you remember that name. He is a Minnesota product. Top of my head, I believe he went to Moorhead High School. Don't quote me on that. I don't know why I want to say that, but I believe that's what it is. Really sneaky guy at Washington that I think could wind up being their best defensive lineman this year. And then lastly, Jackson Howard at Minnesota. I think Howard is one of the great question marks heading into this year for the Gophers. Former 4-star guy, arguably behind Smith, they're the second most talented defensive lineman on the team, but he didn't play much last year. And why is that? He was supposed to be this LSU transfer who's going to step in and contribute right away. And it wouldn't shock me if he doesn't play a whole lot this year either. But also, it wouldn't shock me if he took a big step and became like a really solid player where heading into next year, he's getting some Anthony Smith hype. So this is a huge year for him in his development. Like if it doesn't happen this year, I don't know if it ever will. Um, but I think it can happen, and I'm willing to bet on that personally. I would have loved to put him higher on this list, but I love the talent. I love the character. And I think he's going to have a big year for the Gophers, which overall makes me, I'm very bullish on their defensive line. A lot of people are saying they don't have much depth, which is one thing, but I mean, those 3 guys, really good. Jalen Logan Redden, I like. Lucas Finney's played a lot. And then they added a bunch of transfers. You have Mo Amanode from Purdue. You have Stephen Curtis from Illinois State. Rushawn Lawrence from Stony Brook. And that's just a lot of depth there. I don't know why everyone's like, man, this defensive line has a lot of questions. I like it. And I think it's middle of the pack in the Big Ten, if not top 30%. So I think it's a good group for the Gophers. I'm really excited to watch Anthony Smith play football this year. Jackson Howard is one guy I'm also really excited to see how much he developed in the offseason. But I like their defensive line heading in this year. Anthony Smith is a big reason why, but that's where we're going to wrap up this video. I appreciate you guys for watching, as always. Probably be back next week with an inside linebacker rankings, and then we can wrap this up with some defensive back rankings by the end of the month, maybe early July. And then we can get into some more preseason talk. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification. Helps us get found. Drop a like on the video. And as always, I appreciate you guys for listening. Make sure to follow our stuff on Gophers on a side, Timberwolves on a side, Vikings and Twins. And until next time.